Okay, here's some homework help for page 477. I'm going to work a couple of these problems, starting with number 15. Remember that when we have the addition or subtraction of radicals, we have to simplify each radical and leave it in its own room. So I'm going to bring down the two symbols, they're both minus signs, and then I'm going to simplify what is in each of those different rooms. So for the first one, the 5 comes down, it's finished, the radical 2 comes down, so there's really nothing to do for that one. It's 5 radical 2. This one, however, the 4 is finished. I need to break the radical 8 into radical 4 times radical 2. I know the square root of 4 is 2. I don't know the square root of 2, so that just comes down. And I've got 4 times 2, which is 8, times radical 2. The last one comes down just as it is, so it's a radical 2. Now, when we have a radical without a number in front, it's always a good idea to put a 1 in front. Because the way this reads is I got 4 radical 2's, I'm going to take away 8 radical 2's and then take another 1 radical 2 away. So for the first part, 5 radical 2 minus 8 radical 2, that's a negative 3 radical 2 minus my 1 radical 2. And negative 3 radical 2 minus 1 radical 2 is negative 4 radical 2. This next problem is a big one. I've got 4 terms. But again, we're going to start by bringing our symbols down. So there's a minus that comes down, a plus that comes down, and another plus that comes down. And we're going to simplify the 4 terms within their specific rooms. So for the first one, 7 comes down, but the radical 8 can be broken down into radical 2 times radical 4. So I know the square root of 4 is 2. I don't know the square root of 2. So that all works out to be 14 radical 2. The next one, the 5 comes down. Now this radical 80, there's a number of ways I can break that down. The one that's probably most obvious to you would be the square root of 8 times the square root of 10. So I'm going to split this into the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. And this is going to be the square root of 2 times the square root of 5. Now I can put these two guys together. They're buddies, so they're going to come out as a 2. This square root of 4 is going to come out as a 2, and this square root of 5 is going to come down just as it is. So when I multiply 5 times 2 times 2, I'm going to get 20 radical 5. Now in the next room, the 2 comes down, and oh goodness, let's say I'm going to do this, the square root of 18 times the square root of 10. Well, the square root of 18, I can write that as the square root of 9 times the square root of 2, and the square root of 10 is the square root of 2 times the square root of 5. So I see some more buddies here. These buddies are going to go together and give me a 2. I know the square root of 9 is 3, and I don't know the square root of 5, so it comes down as it is. Now in this case, I've got 2 times 3 is 6, times 2 again is 12, so that gives me 12 radical 5. And then in my last room, I'm going to write this as radical 25 times radical 2. I know the square root of 25 is 5. I don't know the square root of 2, so I just bring it down, so that turns into 5 radical 2. Now you have to be careful because you need to add like radicals. So those two are like radicals and these two are like radicals. So when I add the radical 2 terms together, I got 14 radical 2 plus 5 radical 2, that gives me 19 radical 2. And then when I combine the negative 20 radical 5 with the positive 12 radical 5, I get a negative 8 radical 5. So my answer is 19 radical 2 minus 8 radical 5. You cannot combine those because they are not like radicals.